And then I think we're good to go. So on that note, I'm going to welcome you all. Hi everyone, it is wonderful to have so many of you on our webinar tonight. I'm your host, Juliet Turnbull, and I'm the founder of 2to3days, which is a growing and nurturing the largest online community of highly capable women who wish to pursue their careers on a flexible basis. And therefore, we're providing companies large and small with the ability to advertise their flexible roles on our site so they can find you and hire you. In today's world, whether you're looking to find your next job or grow your network, you need to be using LinkedIn. And therefore, it gives me immense pleasure to be hosting tonight's webinar with a LinkedIn rock star. Let me introduce you to Lisa Unwin, who has been named by LinkedIn as a top voice for her writing on women in the workplace and diversity in general. She's also the founder of She's Back and author of Your Guide to Returning to Work. And if that's not enough, she's also co-founder of the Reignite Academy, an organisation which partners with city law firms to enable career break lawyers to get their career back on the track. So I'm going to hand you over to Lisa, who's going to share with you the top things to do if you want to grow your personal brand on LinkedIn and to grow your relevant network. Please, as we go through the next 30 minutes or so, please put your questions into the chat box. We've also had some emailed to us, and I will do my level best to feed these into Lisa at the end of her presentation. So over to you, Lisa.
And Juliet, do interrupt if there's some question that's really question that needs to be. And so I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Still there? That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you now see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Right. So as Juliet said, what we're going to focus on tonight is how to use LinkedIn for business development and for your personal branding. I'll touch on the end about some tips for using LinkedIn for job searching, but that could be a completely separate hour. So what this is doing is focusing on the broader subject. What I'm going to cover, why bother listening to me, why bother with LinkedIn, and I'm going to show you some building blocks that you can use to increase your own personal impact. That will include some top 10 tips for your own personal LinkedIn profile. And I also want to talk a little bit about how to create and share content. A little bit on job searching, but what I'd encourage you to do in this sort of worksheets as we go through this is to come out of this with your own personal action plan and list of things that you personally can do after this evening. So quick quiz for you. Do you know how many unique users there are on LinkedIn? Actually, I don't, because it's changing all the time, but we've got one answer to that. Do you know what proportion of LinkedIn users are female versus male? Do you know what the difference is between an article and a post? What's the difference between following someone and connecting with them, and why might you choose to do one versus the other? And can you name one or more factors that will impact how LinkedIn either promotes or ignores the content you share? Questions 3 to 5 we'll be covering during the rest of this session, but just to give you a flavour of the other two. So at the last count, there were more than 675 million users on LinkedIn. It's pretty much 50-50 male and female. And I think the 303 million is out of date now. About half of your LinkedIn users tend to be pretty active users. So it's not just a platform that people go on and then leave, although some people do. A lot of people do use it quite actively. And there are definitely influencers and decision makers and recruiters and employers on there. So one of the, just that last point, employers and recruiters, they do use it to find people and to screen people. So if you're looking for a job, you cannot afford not to be on there. And I'll touch a little bit on that later. In terms of why bother listening to me, now, and I would say, if there might be somebody lurking out there who actually works for LinkedIn and could contradict a lot of what I'm going to say. And this is self-taught. I'm not an expert, but in 2014, when I first set up my company, She's Back, I wasn't on LinkedIn. And 4 years later, I was named as a LinkedIn top voice, and I was named again in 2019 as a LinkedIn top voice. So what I'm talking about tonight is what I've learned through my own experience, and so that's why I think it's probably worth listening to at least some of what I've got to say. And just a little bit of background in terms of why I went on LinkedIn. So before I took a career break, I'd been a management consulting partner, and I was then I was director of brand and communication at Deloitte. But when I left Deloitte in 2008, LinkedIn wasn't something anybody used, not much anyway. And so 6 years later, it was a surprise to me that this platform, suddenly people started to use it. So I sort of put myself on there. And originally it was quite a good way of just connecting with people that I used to work with. When I really got serious though was a couple of years later, I wrote this book, She's Back, Your Guide to Returning to Work, with my co-founder and author, Deb Khan. And our PR budget was about 50p, to be honest. So I didn't know how I was going to promote this book, but through a friend of a friend, I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with one of the country's top PR gurus, a guy called Matthew Floyd. And he literally said he'd give me 10 minutes. And it was supposed to be on the phone, but I made sure I was around the corner from his office when the phone call was supposed to take place, and sort of phoned and said, I'm here, can I just maybe come in and we'll have this chat face to face. So anyway, I went in for my 10 minutes of advice, and he's super, super well connected. And I expected him to say, right, I've got you an article in Grazia, you can be read, Telegraph magazine at the weekend or whatever. And he said, right, I've thought about this book and what you're trying to do. There are 3 channels that are going to be important for you. I sat and waited, and he said, LinkedIn, LinkedIn, and LinkedIn. And that was about it. That was my 10 minutes. And he gave me the name of someone who worked at LinkedIn. And off I went thinking, right, okay, what on earth does he mean? And I sat and thought about it, and I thought, I guess what he must mean, because he's not going to give me any more insight than that, is that a lot of the people who might buy my book are on LinkedIn, and that's a place where I can do my own promotion. I don't have to wait for a journalist to give me the privilege of having a bit of coverage, so I can do it for myself. So that's the approach I took. I started writing, I started sharing content, I started following people with similar interests, and it was that activity that helped me build what became quite a significant profile. So that's how I've led. It's all been self-taught, and I'm just sharing what I found works for me. Just a note before I go on, we said that this training session is about how to use LinkedIn for personal branding and business development. And I love this quote by Jeff Bezos about branding. It's, your brand is what someone says about you when you're not in the room. And what you're trying to do with your personal brand is 2 things. You're trying to build your reputation. So I'm known as someone with some expertise around women in the workplace, people going back to work after a career break, etc. So I had that reputation even before I went on LinkedIn. What I didn't have, well, I had it a bit. What LinkedIn enabled me to do was to build that reputation, because I was writing about different aspects of the problems and the issues. So it looked like I knew what I was talking about. But more importantly than that, it then helped me extend my reach. So it's fine having a fabulous reputation, but if only 10 people know about you, your brand's not very strong. So it's about helping you connect with people who are interested in what you've got to say. So I think about both of those things as you're thinking about how to use the platform and what you want to do with it. So in terms of what I've personally used LinkedIn to do, and I haven't done this all at the same time, but it's helped me conduct research. I was doing a big piece of research for She's Back, and we ended up getting 1,300 women to complete a survey, and that was through LinkedIn. A lot of people shared that. Obviously, I talked about selling my book. I've built my personal brand, connected with clients. We've amplified our message from a PR perspective. We found candidates. I've learned and developed, and I've put it at the bottom there. I've found my tribe. I've found people and met people, both virtually and then in real life, who had sort of got the same sorts of interests as me. So it's really been very good on several dimensions. I just want to bring a couple of those to life. In terms of finding candidates, that picture on the top left there, this was an example of how we use LinkedIn to try and get the message to lawyers that we were recruiting for people who maybe were returning from a career break. Just an interesting point about that. What I was doing in that post was getting people to register for an event that we were hosting. It was hosted by a law firm, and they needed to register. So in the, you can't see it there, but in the wording, I had the link that people could click on to register for a workshop. Now, had I just done the wording and put the link in, the picture there would have been of Eventbrite, the Eventbrite registration page, which actually isn't very interesting. And I've noticed on LinkedIn, people like pictures of people. So what I did before I created that post was I found the photograph. I put the photograph in as content, and then I wrote the words. And if you do it that way, LinkedIn doesn't override your photograph and with the Eventbrite link. So that's just a bit of a tip there. So it's been really helpful with spreading the word, finding candidates. Recruiting for our team, this was quite interesting because about a year ago, we decided we needed to find a recruiter to join us. And again, our budget was very small, so we didn't want to pay to advertise, especially when it was only one person that we were looking for. And so I posted something on LinkedIn saying we're looking to recruit and grow the team. Now, what was interesting about Sharon, she was already working in recruitment, but she'd been following me. I don't think we were connected. Well, no, we maybe were connected. She'd followed me at first, and she had been liking and sharing some of my posts. Now, what is definitely true is that if you write something and somebody likes it, and if they share it, even better, you sort of like them. It's really nice to have that sort of bit of a positive affirmation. And, you know, you're often curious, you're checking who's doing this liking. And so I recognised Sharon's name because she had liked and shared some of my posts. So when she actually connected with me, I accepted the connection. And then when she saw that we were recruiting, she sent me this message on LinkedIn. I phoned her, and about 5 minutes later, she was hired. And so we've done recruiting through that platform. Going down to the bottom right, it's also been really useful for me to spread the message about the advice I'm trying to give to women about getting their career back on track after a break. And not everybody's a lawyer, and I don't have roles for people who are not lawyers at the moment, but I do have a lot that I want to share. This particular article, Ready to Go, What to Say About That Career Break, was telling people what to say in an interview about your career break, and it had, as you can see there, 16,365 views. So that was, you know, that's a really good way. If people aren't buying my book and they're not, you know, I can't help them directly, I can provide some advice on paper that people can read. And then the other one thing I wanted to touch on was the role of ambassadors. Tracy Gunn is, she's a coach who works a lot with organisations in Ireland on a lot of maternity return coaching. And she also works with a lady called Ciara Given, who runs a flexible recruitment business. And Tracy and Ciara both they were sharing and liking my articles. And that meant that as well as me being able to access the people who follow me, I then got my messages to the people that followed them. And as a result of that, Tracy and Ciara, when my book came out, invited me to go to Dublin and do a book talk there, which was fantastic. And they had a photographer, so I got some good collateral from there, which again helped with the PR. All for nothing. I had to pay for my flight to Dublin, but it was just, you know, taking the opportunity for me to get my message out through that platform and by connecting with other people. So that, any questions, just fire them through to Julia, and I'll stop. But what I just go back to this slide and say, so I've used it for, I don't know, 9 or 10 reasons. What I'd encourage you to do, before you go about putting any more time into improving your profile or thinking about what to post, just be clear on what are your objectives? What are the top 3 things you're trying to do? And have a think about it, obviously, after today. So having been clear on your objectives, I have then developed my own framework for what I think are the main building blocks for creating a profile and presence on LinkedIn. The first thing you have to do, and I'll talk through each one of these in a bit more detail. The first thing you need to do is build your profile and brand. You know, what is your reputation? What is it that you're interested in? What do you know about? What's your area of expertise and interest? And this is about your personal profile. I think also you have to have a point of view. You know, what do you want to be known for, and what's your opinion on that. You need to build a network, so you share that point of view. And I think it's really, I personally feel quite strongly that you have to develop your own authentic tone of voice. And I'll give you some examples of that shortly. It's really obvious, I think, anyway, when somebody's PA is doing their LinkedIn for them. And it's just so not authentic, and it comes across as just corporate PR and bullshit, basically. So, you have to be authentic, I believe. And then you need to think about creating new content and sharing content. And then ultimately, you've also got to think about activity and presence. How often are you going to be there? Interestingly, I think at the moment, LinkedIn's pretty quiet because people have got other things on their minds. But generally speaking, before COVID-19 happened, I would say you need to be there at least weekly, a couple of days a week, depending on what you want to achieve and how important it is to you. So just moving on to your LinkedIn profile, some top tips. I've put not just a professional photo, but also look at your background image. So when you go on LinkedIn, I'll show you a picture of this in a moment, but you've got your profile, and then if you do nothing else, there'll just be a blue banner that comes at the back. And that's a waste of space if you don't use that to do something personal. And I'll give you some examples of what other people have done there. So get a professional photo and a background image. Make your title meaningful. If you're hunting for a job and you're a Magic Circle trained litigation lawyer, then say that. Don't just say lawyer, because that doesn't really mean much. So if you're the CEO, that's fine. But I'm not a big fan of wishy-washy titles that don't really mean very much. The about section is your elevator pitch. That's the bit, just going back to the Jeff Bezos quote, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Ideally, it needs to be short and pithy enough for someone who's ready to remember it. So it can include what your area of expertise is, what you're aiming to do, what sector you work in, what your big interests are. So think about the 3 or 4 points you really want people to remember about you. And in that, just be aware that unlike a CV, with LinkedIn, you can put in multimedia options. So you can put in links to clips, videos, projects, etc. When it comes to experience, your key employers, clients, use keywords and there's no limits. Unlike a CV, which we always say you shouldn't really be more than 2 pages. Here there is no limit. You can put a lot in here. And in terms of, if you're new to LinkedIn, you don't know what keywords are basically the types of things somebody would put into a search if they were looking for somebody who could do a particular job. And if you're not sure what they are, think about somebody you might know who has done a similar job to you and look them up and look at what words they use. Or look for an organisation on LinkedIn that's probably recruiting for a job, and they will say what experience they need. And that's the clue, because if you've got that experience, then copy the same keywords. We don't lie, obviously. But it's a good tip to look at others who've got similar skills to you. Same as keys. On settings, I'll show you a screenshot I've done on settings, but take a look at your settings. You can choose whether you want to be invisible. Oh, sorry. When you go, if anybody was to go on LinkedIn and go onto my page, you will notice that on the right-hand side, often if you search someone on LinkedIn, it will say viewers also viewed, and there'll be lots of other people who've got similar skill set to you. In settings, you can turn that off. So instead of seeing viewers also viewed, it'll direct you to some training that might be of interest or something else. And that, if you're looking for a job, you might not want people to go and find other people with the same skill sets as you. There's a switch you can toggle to say whether you're seeking opportunities or not. And you can choose whether you want to be in visible or private mode. So if you want to go and have a good hunt around and look at people who are doing something similar to you and copy how they're describing themselves, you might want to do that in private mode. So that because people do something, they can see who's viewing their profile and sometimes go and have a look. It's worth joining groups of people, especially if you want to learn more or you want to have a good way of sharing content with people who might be of interest. It's a decent idea to join groups that have similar interests to you, and they could be reasonably local, they could be global, they can be small, large. Some are more active than others, but it's a decent way of sharing and making new connections. I'd also encourage you to personalise your LinkedIn URL, and otherwise it will automatically go to some sort of random string of letters and numbers, but it's very easy to personalise, and it looks sort of like you know what you're doing. I'd really encourage you to include visual content if you can, and make sure you've got some evidence of your amazing activity. Just to give you a couple of examples of what I mean here. So this is the top screen grab. Julia and I tried to do a screen share earlier on where I was sharing my PowerPoint and sharing LinkedIn, and it was a disaster. And last time I did that last week, I managed to leave the thing for 2 minutes, which was a disaster. So I'm not doing that anymore. So I've done a screenshot. So here you can see, this is on my homepage. Where it says edit public profile and URL, that's where you would go if you want to change that random string of letters to Lisa Unwin, Reignite Academy, or Juliet Turnbull 2to3days, or something like that. When you click on settings, you then go into, there's lots of options you've got there around how people see you and what your homepage looks like, etc. That's where you can click the profile viewing options there. Choose whether you're in visible or viewing in private mode. It's easy to switch on or off. And these two are quite interesting. The next two at the bottom, sharing job changes, on notifying people when you're in the news. What you don't want to do is send a notification to everyone every time you change your LinkedIn profile, because that's just irritating. However, if you've got a book out, or you're starting a new job, or you've got something that you do want people to know about, it's worth making sure that is on at the time when you make that change to your LinkedIn profile. Because then people will congratulate you, you can connect with them, and it's an opportunity to have a conversation with people. But my advice would be to only change those when you change the one about job changes really consciously, and when you do actually want to let people know. There's a couple of other profiles which, if I was confident of not losing you, I'd go and show you them, but instead I've done some screenshots. They're people in my line of work, so they may not be that interesting to you, so you need to think about who do you want to go and look at that would be similar. Aviva Wittenberg-Cox is a writer and consultant who does a lot of work on gender balance. Andy Woodfield is a partner at PwC and very active in the BAME community and LGBT, in LGBT. And he was head of diversity, I think, at PwC for a while. I'll just show you them. So here's Andy. What I love about his page in particular is his about section, because it really brings to life his personality. He's way more than a PwC partner, and I love that. I'm Andy First and Furious. First and foremost, I'm curious. I'm here on the planet to learn and experience life and the amazing uniqueness of human beings, and he really is. He's very well connected. Does a lot of work in the diversity space, and I don't think he comes across as your typical PwC partner, and he's done that deliberately because he's got a personal brand beyond that of the organisation that he works in. And I think everybody has the opportunity to do that if that's important to you. Aviva, so this 7, 1, 3 and 4, they're books that she's written. They're all very short and very, very good. And so she's chosen to highlight those books there, but also before you get too far down her page, she's got those two clicks to YouTube videos of her doing TED Talks, which is what I mean about using multimedia, if you can. Juliet, are there any questions?
Yeah, there are questions coming in. The first one is from Georgie. What sort of mix would you advise between shared and created content?
I'll come on to that.
Okay, well, that's why I think it might be easy that I pick up these questions at the end.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what I'd encourage you to do after today is just think about those 9 or 10, the 10th one was showcase your amazing activity, which is about sharing content, which I'll come on to. Just think about, go back to the objectives, what you're trying to achieve from your profile and background on LinkedIn. I'm going to go on LinkedIn, I'm very dark in here almost. And think about, you know, where are you today and which bits could be better. Where are we? Okay, so the next building block, so that's the bottom building block, which is about your profile. The next thing is that for personal branding and business development point of view, you have to have a point of view. What is it that you're interested in? What are you going to talk about? Now this is mine. I'm interested in women in the workplace, but that's a big topic. So within that, some of the things I'm interested in, and this guides what I share, what I notice, who I follow, and what I post, is just starting at the bottom. You know, I've got a point of view around ageism and sexism. I've got a point of view that women get written off at about 45, when actually we've got 15 fabulous years ahead of us because we've done bringing up small children. So that's something I'm interested in and always on the lookout for. I'm interested in women's career paths and how they don't follow straight lines. And I've written about that, and I am always often looking for people who are, providing examples of that. Women in finance, that's, topic close to my heart, is that I don't think women are good enough at taking responsibility for our own financial futures sometimes. And that led me to find a woman called Sally Krawcheck, who runs Elevate. I think she was an investment banker, and now she runs this investment organisation specifically focused on women in the US. And the reason she's interesting, she often posts some content on her website that is really well written about. She does one about what a career break does to your finances. And so it's, knowing that I was interested in that topic led me to her, which leads me to content that I can then share with others. Obviously, gender diversity is of interest, but I'm also interested in that bottom one, inspirational role models. Who's doing really interesting stuff? Who's maybe demonstrating some of the other aspects that I've talked about, and aspects and dimensions of what I'm concerned about. And the reason you need this is because I think it anchors what it is you want to talk about and what it is you want to share. But it also helps you think about different dimensions of that. So, that's a very easy worksheet to create for yourself. Think about what's yours. What's your point of view? What do you want to talk about? Where do you have an opinion? And it could be, just purely around what you're an expert at in the workplace. And think about the different dimensions of that, because that will then help you think about what to post, what to share, who to follow, who to connect with. Okay. Which brings me on to the next building block, which is about building your network and following and connecting. So the difference is you have to ask somebody to be a connection. You can follow anybody. So people often ask me, who should I connect with? What's the etiquette? To be honest, I think a lot of people now expect to be connected on LinkedIn. It's no big deal. It's nice to put a little personal note. And I would just, what's the worst they can do? Ignore you. But maybe begin with connecting with people you know and trust. A good friend of mine that I met at the school gates, she'd had quite a long time off work. I think her mother was ill, then her sister was ill, then she had young kids. And by the time she knew it, she'd been out of the workforce for 10 years. And I sort of said to her, well, one of the things you need to do, you need to get yourself on LinkedIn. And she said, oh, I don't really want to. And I said, why? She said, well, I'd be really embarrassed because all the people that I was at INSEAD with, and she didn't know me at INSEAD, all the people I was at INSEAD with and all the people that I used to work with, they're all now really senior. It's like, great, that's fabulous, that means they can help you. So, connect with them, say, hi, I'm back in, here's what I'm doing. People generally will help and would like to help and like to be asked. Connections are important because they can help you make further introductions. The other thing I think to think about is that what LinkedIn has done is it's taken down a lot of the barriers and taken away the gatekeepers. who previously could have stopped you trying to connect with someone. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago where we'd been talking to one law firm about becoming a member of the Reignite Academy, and they were umming and ahhing. We were talking to the recruiters, and in the end, you could tell it wasn't going to happen. And we were just a bit disappointed. And then Sharon, who I work with, she said, you know what, let's have a look at which of the partners in that organisation is responsible for D&I. So and that's easy to find on the internet. So she found out, and it was a guy who had got an award from Management Today for his activity around diversity. So I thought, I bet they've not asked him whether he's interested in that firm being part of the Reignite Academy. So I looked him up on LinkedIn, and I sent him a connection request saying, hi, we've not met, but I'm Lisa Unwin, I'm one of the co-founders of the Reignite Academy. Just saw that you got this award in Management Today, sounds fabulous. If at some point you'd like to have a chat, we'd love to tell you about the work we're doing. And he came straight back and said, yeah, that sounds fabulous, let's set something up. And then this happened, so God knows when that's going to actually happen. But you can do that. And previously I would suggest that, 15 years ago, I'd have had to email him. His email would have been opened by his PA, who probably would have deleted it. So the barriers are down, but you've got to.
Lisa, can I jump in, because I think this question is quite relevant. A lady called Susan's asked, do you have a suggested script for when you're asking someone to connect on LinkedIn, someone you have not met but who's in the same sector or company that is of interest to you?
I would just make sure it's personal. Go back to the point, one of the building blocks was about having an authentic voice. Just make it, I would write whatever you're going to write and then say it and make sure it's how you would say it. Yeah. So it's not overly formal. Hi, we've got this in common, would love to connect here.
Yeah, I would agree. Make it as authentic and as genuine, and explain the reason why, because you're coming to them out of the blue. So the more you can explain why you want to connect, then it makes sense. And keep, cheesy, keep it away from, keep it genuine, not cheesy, and most people will connect back.
Yeah. The other thing about connections is you can send them messages for free. And I personally think it's fine to connect with people you don't know. Just be careful, because you can end up with loads of spam. If somebody's title is something to do with, I help you build your leads, I can double your leads by so much, they're going to come back and try and sell you something. So just be careful. In terms of followers, what's interesting to do is, if you go back to that bubble diagram, is once you know which you're interested in, that helps you think about who you might want to follow, who might be posting interesting content that you'd like to see. You don't need to request them. What is one technique is, so if there's somebody that you'd like to connect with, but you don't know them and they don't know you from Adam, start following them. And maybe if you start to like and share their content, and if you comment on their content, they might comment back, and then they recognize your name, and then you can send a connection. I think that's what Sharon did with me. So sometimes following someone is the first step in then connecting with them down the line. Okay.
And would you say, Lisa, that it's worth paying for premium?
No. Absolutely not. Unless you're a recruiter. And I think, no. I mistakenly took, they're always telling you to sign up for, take premium free for a month, and then you end up paying. I stupidly took it free for a month, and I ended up paying for it for 6 months when I didn't need it. Unless you're a recruiter, I don't think you need to pay. So that's building your network. Then just want to talk a little bit about building and sharing content. So creating new content. Now I enjoy writing, so it's not something that comes, and I don't find it particularly difficult. But I know it's quite hard to create content that people are going to read, and it does take a bit of practice. What I would say is, don't worry about getting it being perfect immediately. Just have a go, and you'd be surprised, and you'll find out what works. So if you're going to create new content, you've got to have a title that grabs attention with a subpoint that makes the salient points, so makes people want to read on. You can't be too obscure. It's like if you think about newspaper headlines, and people, sometimes it's people's job just to write newspaper headlines. You want to give people enough information that they want to read on. It can't be too, I've occasionally made mistakes of, trying to do some fabulous analogy that nobody understands, and so they don't read it. So it's, think about that. Make yourself, put yourself in the job of a newspaper editor. Choose an interesting image. Unsplash, I found, is a really good website for getting free images. So you just go onto Unsplash and you type in whatever word. I would just one request: never ever use a picture of a woman sitting at a laptop with a baby on her shoulder. It drives me absolutely potty.
Yeah.
As done.
Also, the more I've noticed, because we trial it, the more natural, the more interesting they are. It could be a picture. If it's, the more human they are, the more people will click on the article because they like the image. The more corporate it is, then forget it.
Yeah. And the other one that I hate is if it's about gender diversity and they'll have like a line of 8 people and 7 of them are in business suits, and then you've got this woman in a pencil skirt in stilettos. I mean, no, it's awful. So, yeah. And good, photos work. That photo I showed on one of the earlier slides was just a photo taken on an iPhone at a training event that we ran.
Yeah.
People like it.
The more relevant, again, it comes back, as you were saying earlier, Lisa, the more authentic it is, the more real it is, the more believable it is, the more people want to comment and engage.
That's a really good point. So some things that work well are how to, top 10, 7 ways, 5 whys. That sort of post works pretty well. It's good to break up your post with images and headings. And LinkedIn, it's a good publishing tool. It guides you on how to do it. It makes it very easy for you to put in quotes, put in links, put in images. A good tip is to, this came from a journalist I've done some work with, make your paragraphs around 60 words, and use short sentences, and write as you would speak. When Deb and I were writing the book, she used to make me stand up if I'd written a sentence that sounded too corporate. She'd say, "Lisa, you don't say it like that. Stand up, say it, and then sit down and write it." So that's quite a good tip. And write for a 12-year-old, and try and avoid really, really long sentences, because they're just difficult for people to read because they're not following your train of thought. A tip is then...
Can I just jump in there? A lady called Susan says she's looking for a job. Do you still need to do this content creation?
No. That's going back to your top 3 objectives. If your objective is getting a job, you don't need to do content creation particularly. No. This is more relevant if you're about building your brand. If you're in a job and you maybe want to get a promotion, or you want to move companies, that might be helpful for that, depending on what the organisation, what it is you want to do. But no, it's not. You don't need to be creating new content if your primary objective is job search. If you are creating content, you create it as an article first. Use hashtags so that it can be found and it will appear in people's feeds. What you then do is, so you make your article, you publish it, and so it's gone live. And then what you should do is share it as a post. You share it on other platforms, so share it on, if you're in Facebook groups, you can share it in Facebook, you can share on Twitter, I'm not on Twitter, and you can share on LinkedIn as a post. So then it's got 2 opportunities to be sent into people's feeds, one as an article and one as a post, and I'll come on to the different implications of that. And if people do comment on your fabulous new content, like their comment or comment back, or try and engage and respond to them if you've got the time. So just a couple of examples of that. So they did an article and a post. So I wrote this article. This was a new article. So listen up, dads, taking paternity leave is career enhancing, and it had 411 views. That means, and the photograph was one that Jill I'd interviewed just sent me. So again, it's authentic, interesting, interesting title, because a lot of people think taking paternity leave is actually not career enhancing. And the actual article got 411 views. However, what I then did, I shared it as a post, and this time it got 4,154 views. Now the difference is, LinkedIn's always changing its terminology here, but that original article with the 411 views, that means that 411 people clicked on that article. So there's a good approximation for how many people have read it. When you share something as a post, the views do not mean that somebody's necessarily clicked. The views mean it's appeared in somebody's feed and it's been on their screen. You can't tell that they've necessarily clicked. What you can do though is, because I can see that 60 people liked it and I've got 11 comments, it means that 60 likes is quite high. So that means a good proportion must have clicked on and liked it, but you just don't know. The analytics are not brilliant.
Lisa, on that one, is it best to create the hashtags or use the existing hashtags that have already been created by the originator of the article?
I don't know. I think you can create your own. I'm not sure. I think you just use hashtags that seem relevant, because that's how they get picked up and shared into people's feeds. It's a bit weird though. One time I got a notification saying that one of my posts was trending in the hashtag women. How do you get in hashtag women? Not very narrow, but as I say, I'm not an expert. This is just what I've sort of come to learn.
Yeah, I think it's just, again, keep it real.
Yeah. Oops. Right. Oh, I don't know why this does this. I'm trying to. For some reason, this like let me just so you can see all of that slide. So sharing content. So this is about sharing other people's content. What's not very interesting in those sorts of examples, when somebody says, I'm proud to be at this award, or here's our latest report, or my experience, nobody's interested, nobody cares that you've been to an award ceremony. And it just feels as though people are just doing self-promotion. They can't think of what's post, so they're going to post what is usually a not very good picture of themselves at an award ceremony. That's not very helpful to people. It's not advancing the course of what they understand or their knowledge or anything like that. So it's easy to do, but not very interesting, and tends not to be very engaging. What is slightly more interesting, more engaging, is if you're providing people with something, you sort of, and the orange there, I said, I found this, so you don't need to look. Here's something we haven't thought of. Give people something new. So I've just read this article in the FT today. I think X, Y, Z. So-and-so published research which says, I've read a story about. So you're trying to be useful rather than just simply shoving content out there and promoting yourself. Go back to my play, I don't know why that keeps. So just to give you a couple of examples of that, these were two things I shared. So there was this article in the Telegraph saying 3/4 of women lack the confidence to ask for senior roles at work. So, okay, the article itself was reasonably interesting, but what I did in that post was I said, this is really annoying, because if you're going to say that they lack confidence, how do you build confidence at work? And so I did a bit of a controversial heading to that said, here are the 5 things you do to build confidence. Similarly, this FT article, 5 ways to look as though you care about women at work, as well as sharing it, I actually put in something about my personal view in the space at the top before you share the article. And I think it's just adding that extra bit of opinion, insight, controversy, something that's eye-catching that actually I think for both of those meant that they had quite a lot of views. This one, Katie Friedman runs a Facebook group called Flexible Work for Women Like Me, and she just sort of said, Laura in my closed Facebook group asked me to post anonymously. The London law firm says leaving slightly early is setting a bad example. And that's all she posted. She didn't post a picture, there was no link to an article, and it had over 60,000 views, and the number of comments that people got, because, and what the reason for that, this one didn't even have an interesting title, getting people to, a lot of early likes helps. If people are influencers and they like your content, that helps. People commenting and sharing it on themselves, suddenly the things go, it spirals out of control, because LinkedIn likes people to interact with it as a platform. So if it can see that a particular post is getting interactions, it'll push it into other people's feeds. So again, you know, topical, real, authentic will work. So yeah, I think I've talked about this analytics. You can it'll tell you the views and likes of your share, number of reshares, which is interesting. You can get in and see your audience demographics, but what counts as a view is different. An article somebody's clicked on and opened, a post, it just means this, or you don't know whether they've actually clicked on it or not. So some things to think about if this is relevant for you. How often are you going to post? When are you going to create new content? On what subjects? What will you look to share? And how are you going to track and measure progress? I mean, you know, when I started posting and sharing, I didn't have many followers. I didn't have, I was just putting content out there into the ether and not knowing whether anybody was ever going to connect. But you sort of do figure out what people are interested in, and that's, and also, like any social media, you can reshare. You don't, you know, just because you've done something once, it's fine to share it again 2 weeks later, because people haven't necessarily seen it in their feed.
Can you just explain when you would do the difference between an article and a post, and when it's best to post an article or article a post?
So I've just created an article. I created an article today. So a friend of mine was quoted in the Sunday Times talking about resilience. So I've created an article today, which is just there as an article. So if anybody, I can't go onto my LinkedIn because could lose you all. So I've created this article, which has a photograph of his quote in the Sunday Times as the picture. And then this new article that says, I've been thinking about resilience, and these are the ways in which I think we need to build more resilience. And it's not about emotional and mental health, it's really practical things. Like we need to be better at sharing parenting, and not, you know, thinking about when to work from home, when to go into the office, that sort of thing. So that's now my article posted. Now, it was, sorry, my article is there. What I haven't done is shared it. I don't think I've shared it as a post. I haven't shared it as a push. I'll probably do that tomorrow. And I haven't done that because it's there for people to see today. And I don't think Mondays are great for posting, especially at the moment, because people are not very active. Tuesdays to Thursdays are pretty good. So I might share it as a post tomorrow, probably about 11 o'clock-ish. It's quite handy if you are, you know, on a bit of a campaign, which I was when I was writing the book, to use something like Hootsuite to schedule your posts in advance. So you're sort of thinking about, well, what's happening during the week, and I'm going to time this to coincide with that. But that's if you've really got, you know, I was on a mission to sell a book, so I had the time and motivation. Does that make sense?
Yep, does to me. I hope that does to the ladies who asked the question. We've got quite a few questions to ask. Have you got much more?
I've got one slide.
Okay.
Which is about LinkedIn and job sharing. Oops, sorry. I think the most important thing is really putting time into your personal profile, making sure you've got the right keywords, make sure you've clicked open for opportunities, unless you're in a job and you don't want people to find out. Use the open job roles that are there to check out how to use relevant experience and keywords, and be really proactive about finding the organisations you want to work for and the employers you'd like to target, and start following them. But you could do a whole other hour on that. Actually, my book, She's Back, Your Guide to Returning to Work, does have more information about how to use LinkedIn for job searching. Do you want to go to questions?
Yes, I'm just going to go through the ones that were emailed to give me how would you bring together, if you've sort of got two worlds going on. You've got your personal profile, and so you want to be a thought leader, but you've also got a small business that you're building. What would your advice be?
I think you've got to prioritise. I personally, unless you've got a team that, you know, and somebody you want to get to help do your social media, I think it's really hard so we have a page for the Reignite Academy, and I'm just really being honest here. I'm sure I should probably post on that more, but I don't, because I've only got so much time in the day.
Yeah, or what we do on 2 to 3 days, if you've got a small business, post it on your business page, and then you go in and share it as an individual so that it then goes onto your personal network. That's the way you get round the two. There's another question here. How would you, I think I'm going to answer your own question. I'm going to answer the question with the question, but during COVID-19, when you can't go and network with people in the normal way of things, how would you suggest you use LinkedIn to grow your network? Would it be through posting relevant content, Lisa, or would you have another top tip?
To grow your network?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd just be a little bit, I'd start to think about who to follow. Who's sharing content that you're interested in, and therefore who you can use. So, for example, I know there's one of our candidates interviewed for a job at a law firm recently. Everything's on hold, but that particular law firm does a lot of posting on LinkedIn. So I've said to her, just keep following what they're posting, because they're posting a lot on their corporate page about projects that they're involved in, how the law is changing, how COVID-19 is impacting different parts of the business. So I think it goes back to thinking about what your objective is.
Absolutely. Yep. We've got one here which I will answer. Lady Susan wants to know the difference between your CV and your LinkedIn profile. Your resume, as you call it, your CV is a summary of what you've done, whilst your LinkedIn profile is about what you're looking forward to. It's going forward, and the two have to sit hand in hand, but they are different. And your LinkedIn profile must not look like your CV. So I hope that helps. So you'll see, as I say, your CV is a summary of what you've done, and your LinkedIn profile is moving forward what you want to do. Another question here is, how do you search for people who might have content you're interested in? That's a good one. How do you find these people, Lisa?
Google.
Yeah, they've got interesting stuff, but you don't know that they exist. Is there a way of finding them on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I would go off LinkedIn, go onto Google, and find, you know, so say my women in finance, you know, global experts in women in finance, in financial management for women, or look at who's written books on topics that you're interested in, go onto Amazon, to find the people somewhere else, and then come and find them on LinkedIn.
That's a very good point. Let me just go back to, I'm conscious we got, right, hang on, let me just go back. I just want to check we've done the people who've emailed in earlier. How to sell yourself as a candidate. Catherine, we're not talking too much today about selling yourself as a candidate rather than building your profile. We will be doing another LinkedIn session on job search. Be interested in the best way to tag people. I assume that is just putting in the @ sign, Lisa. There's nothing more you can add on that. If you want to tag people in LinkedIn, you just literally put the @ sign and then put their name.
And their name. That's sometimes a good, so if you, say you've got, what you can do if you've written a post that you think is, there are other people who are experts who might have opinions, you could put, like, these are my top 5 tips for keep hanging on to your job in a recession. What do you think at Juliet Turnbull at so and so, and ask other people to comment? That can be just random.
No, I agree with that. That's a very good. The way more conversation you get on your posts or your articles, and that creates, it helps to build your network in your community. Okay, I think we've nearly, oh, hang on. No, there's lots of practical questions. I think some people are answering their own questions in here. What would be your final top tip, the one thing that you would say is the holy grail of building your brand on LinkedIn, Lisa? How would you
be authentic?
Be authentic. Yep. And that's what I spoke to a top guy within LinkedIn about 6-8 months ago, and he said exactly the same. And when I have trialed it myself, the more authentic I've been, the more I've shown my vulnerability, the more I've had the greater engagement than when I've been wooden and closed and held back. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to sign off, and so it's time for me to go and have my supper and have a glass of wine. Lisa, you've done an amazing job. You've held 100 people in the cup of your hand for the last hour. I've received texts and the chat has been coming through. It's been a fabulous session. Thank you very much. We will be sending out a link. It takes a while for it to flick through from Zoom, and my team are quite busy, but we will get it out to you and edit out the ums and ahs. And just start following everybody. Start following Lisa and me, and we will we'll come back to you and comment and enjoy it. Have fun with it. Don't be scared of it. Is my top tip. Just start.
Cool.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody. Have a good evening, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.